Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today. After Liam's tumor scam job was revealed, Grace was arrested. Will she go to prison? Following the revelation of Liam Spencer's tumor fake-out, Grace Buckingham might be arrested. Will the money grabber end up in prison? It appears that Liam was treated for a tumor that never really existed, based on all the facts that BNB is now providing. After collapsing at Bill Spencer's house, Liam did in fact end up in the hospital with a brain bleed, but everything else seemed to have been part of a larger plot. Changing Liam's scan to another one and making it appear as though he had an inoperable brain mass wouldn't have been that difficult. We would say that the medications Grace provided Liam are to blame for his deteriorating health. It appears that Grace has been assembling the elements of this fraud for some time. She proceeded to the last stage when dollar bill seemed to cover the cost of Liam's medical miracle. Stated differently, it appears like Grace made up Liam's tumor in order to persuade Bill to cover an unexpected treatment. It's likely that Liam's recent surgery only involved a cut on the back of his head to sell this. Naturally, Grace is rushing to settle previous debt involving her ex-husband, Reese Buckingham. Although it's clear that Grace feels bad about what she's doing, if Paris and Zoe Buckingham have been threatened over unpaid debt, she might be defending them. No matter what Grace faces, manipulating Liam and Bill in this way is cruel. Because they had been fearing Liam's inevitable death, Hope Logan and Steffi Forrester are also victims of persuasion. If Liam's tumor was a hoax from the beginning, none of that was necessary. When the inevitable truth is out, you can guarantee that Bill will want Grace to pay. Grace might end up in jail for fabricating Liam's dire illness and persuading Bill to spend a lot of money on an experimental treatment that never existed. If Grace is taken away in handcuffs and put in jail, that will be satisfying. With all the debt turmoil, the show may attempt to make Grace feel sorry for herself, but she should be imprisoned for her crimes. Grace Buckingham, erected upon the foundation of a non-existent tumor in Liam Spencer's brain, is trembling on the precipice of catastrophic collapse, exposing not just a medical fraud of staggering audacity, but a profound violation of trust that leaves emotional wreckage in its wake and points inexorably towards the cold steel of handcuffs and the bleak prospect of prison bars. Every piece of evidence meticulously laid out by the Bold and the Beautiful paints a damning portrait. Liam's initial collapse at Bill Spencer's office was tragically real, resulting in a genuine brain bleed that demanded urgent medical attention, a terrifying moment of authentic vulnerability that Grace, with chilling opportunism, recognized not as a human crisis but as the perfect springboard for an elaborate, premeditated con. The subsequent narrative of an inoperable, terminal brain mass metastasizing within Liam, casting a pall of despair over Hope Logan, Steffi Forrester, and especially the guilt-ridden Bill, was a monstrous fabrication, a sinister fiction woven from manipulated medical scans likely swapped with deceptive ease, and Liam's alarming physical and cognitive decline orchestrated not by disease, but by the very drugs Grace herself administered, poisoning the man she purported to care for to lend credibility to her lethal lie. This wasn't a spontaneous act of desperation, it was a long game, a scam where pieces were methodically positioned, fostering dependency, controlling information, isolating Liam within her narrative, all patiently awaiting the final, crucial piece. Bill Spencer, drowning in remorse over his role in Liam's initial injury, stepping forward as the deep-pocketed savior desperate to buy his son a miracle. Grace's masterstroke, the experimental treatment Liam recently underwent, now stands revealed as the ultimate sleight of hand, likely nothing more than a superficial surgical incision, a stage prop designed to sell the illusion of a life-saving intervention funded by Bill's millions, the culmination of a scheme where Grace essentially invented a fatal illness solely to then invent and profit from its miraculous cure. While the specter of crushing debt linked to her ex-husband, Reese Buckingham, and potential threats leveraging her daughters, Zoe and Paris Buckingham, might offer a sliver of context for her moral bankruptcy, painting her internal conflict and moments of visible guilt as stemming from this external pressure, it utterly fails to mitigate the calculated, cold-blooded cruelty inherent in her actions. The emotional torture inflicted is vast and unforgivable. Liam, robbed of his autonomy and potentially permanently harmed by the drugs forced upon him, was reduced to a pawn, his body a battleground for her greed. Bill, manipulated through his deepest paternal fears and love, was cynically exploited as an ATM, his desperation monetized. Hope and Steffi, despite their complex history with Liam, endured the agonizing, protracted grief of anticipating his slow, painful death, a grief entirely manufactured, a psychological torment inflicted for no reason other than financial gain. There was no underlying medical reality necessitating this suffering. Every tear shed, every moment of despair, every sleepless night was a direct product of Grace's avaricious fiction. Consequently, when the meticulously hidden truth, the absent tumor, the falsified scans, the drug-induced decline, the sham surgery, inevitably explodes into the open, as all such elaborate deceptions in the high-stakes world of Los Angeles fashion and finance must, the fallout will be thermonuclear. Bill Spencer, a man whose wrath is legendary and whose resources are virtually limitless, will transform from a grieving, grateful father into an instrument of furious retribution. His demand for justice will be absolute, unyielding, and backed by the full force of his wealth and influence. The legal implications for Grace are severe and inescapable. Charges could range from felony fraud, extracting vast sums under blatantly false pretenses, assault, administering harmful drugs without consent, battery, the unnecessary surgery, forgery, falsifying medical records, and potentially even elder abuse depending on legal interpretations surrounding Liam's vulnerability during his genuine recovery. The prospect of Grace Buckingham, once the poised and seemingly compassionate nurse, being forcibly apprehended, processed, and remanded to custody is not merely a satisfying narrative conclusion for viewers appalled by her actions, it is the logical, necessary consequence demanded by the scale of her crimes. While the show may attempt to weave a last-minute sob story, amplifying the Reese debt drama or threats to Zoe and Paris to elicit fleeting sympathy, the fundamental truth remains unassailable. Grace orchestrated a prolonged, multifaceted assault on Liam's body and mind, emotionally eviscerated his loved ones, and callously defrauded Bill Spencer out of a fortune. Her actions transcended mere desperation, they revealed a capacity for profound, premeditated deception that exploited the most sacred bonds of love and fear. In the face of such deliberate, far-reaching malice, no amount of contextual debt woe can absolve her. The only fitting resolution, the only true justice for the lives she shattered and the trust she annihilated, is for Grace Buckingham to be held fully accountable before the law. Prison doesn't just await, it is the inevitable, deserved destination for a woman who weaponized medical terror for profit, proving that the most dangerous tumors aren't always biological, sometimes, they are malignant greed festering in the human heart, and for that malignancy, incarceration is the necessary, curative excision. The handcuffs closing around her wrists won't just signify her arrest, they will be the tangible symbol of a con artist finally meeting the inescapable consequence of a con built on nothing but lies and poisonous betrayal. Learn about the unknown physician giving Liam another chance at life. A new chance at life for Liam Spencer. The process begins with Grace Buckingham. First, once Bill Spencer uses his fortune, Grace Buckingham will present Liam with a novel experimental cure. When Grace gets a notification on her phone about $1 million transfer, we'll find her feeling relieved. Grace will do the initial operation, but if Liam wants to recover, further measures will be required. For the duration of his experimental treatment program, Liam will have to attend a private clinic, and a new physician will be assigned to him when he arrives. The identity of this doctor is unknown at this time, therefore it will be interesting to find out who is responsible for the scheme that might save Liam's life. Bill won't care as long as Liam is cured, even though this seems really shady. As long as it gives Liam an opportunity to recover from his brain tumor, Bill won't mind, despite the fact that the entire situation seems highly questionable. Naturally, there are good grounds to be concerned because Grace has been acting very erratic lately. It appears that Grace may be being forced to collect victims like Liam for this experimental procedure. This suggests that the new physician is not just a good person trying to help people, rather, he has a sinister intent. B&B probably wouldn't follow this plotline unless it was helping Liam heal, although it might be more about money than true concern. Regardless of any ulterior motives, Liam might get the vital outcomes he sorely needs thanks to this new doctor's innovative method. Bill wants to be forgiven for the Luna situation and is paying for everything. Bill now has the opportunity to make amends for helping Luna Nozawa get out of jail because he is paying for everything and making all the preparations. Bill can also work to improve their father-son bond going forward and correct other past mistakes he committed with Liam. We pledge to keep you updated on any noteworthy casting announcements as the mystery doctor is scheduled to emerge soon. Liam's last chance to survive appears to be this potentially dangerous and unquestionably experimental treatment, and Bill won't deny his son that opportunity. Liam Spencer into a corner of despair where even hope's love felt like a distant, fading light, making Bill Spencer's ruthless deployment of wealth, funneled through the ethically compromised conduit of Grace Buckingham, not just a desperate father's gambit but the terrifying ignition of a high-stakes medical odyssey shrouded in profound mystery, its next phase pivoting on the arrival of a completely unknown physician whose identity, motives, and methods are veiled in an unsettling opacity. Transforming Liam's fragile hope for a second chance at life into a perilous dance with a shadowy savior whose very existence whispers of danger even as it promises salvation. Grace's initial role, facilitated by Bill's $1 million transfer that sparked a fleeting, palpable relief across her strained features, a transaction notification glowing ominously on her phone screen, was merely the overture, a necessary but insufficient first incision into the complex, experimental protocol. Her skilled hands performed the preliminary surgery, a calculated risk bought and paid for by Spencer money, yet it was starkly clear this was only the prologue, a stabilizing act. Demanding a sequestered, clandestine continuation far from prying eyes, necessitating Liam's immediate, discreet transfer to an undisclosed private clinic, a gilded cage of hope where the enigmatic architect of this radical, untested treatment would assume absolute control. This transition, this handover from the known, albeit compromised, quantity of Grace to the utterly unknown entity waiting in the sterile, secretive confines of the clinic, is where the true, chilling mystery deepens into an abyss. Who is this doctor materializing from the medical shadows to take stewardship of Liam Spencer's fragile existence? No name resonates, no reputation precedes them, no photograph offers a clue, only the chilling vacuum of anonymity, amplifying the inherent peril of the experimental path chosen. Their credentials are unverified rumors, their affiliations deliberately obscured, their very presence feels less like a benevolent intervention and more like the calculated move of a player in a high-risk game where human life is the ultimate stake, orchestrated potentially under duress, as Grace's recent, visible agitation and the subtle implication of coercion, the unsettling suggestion she is being strong-armed into procuring desperate patients like Liam, paint a disturbing backdrop of manipulation, hinting that this new doctor might be less a healer driven by Hippocratic ideals and more a figurehead, or perhaps a mastermind, for an agenda steeped in something far darker than altruism, where the glittering lure of immense, unregulated funding from a billionaire like Bill Spencer could easily eclipse genuine medical compassion, transforming Liam from a son into a lucrative test subject within a protocol whose ethical boundaries are as blurred as the doctor's identity. Bill Spencer, of course, views this pervasive shoddiness, this thick fog of unanswered questions swirling around the doctor and the procedure, as merely inconvenient static, a negligible price paid in the currency of uncertainty for the priceless potential of his son's cure. His single-minded focus, honed by years of ruthless business dealings and paternal failings now crystallized into raw desperation, burns solely on the outcome, Liam's survival. Ethical quagmires, the potential exploitation of Grace, the unnerving anonymity of the physician wielding the experimental tools near his son's brain, these are mere details eclipsed by the blinding radiance of a possible reprieve. For Bill, this gamble represents a profound, perhaps final, opportunity for redemption, a multifaceted atonement weaving together threads of recent guilt and ancient regrets. The $1 million payment and the orchestration of this risky lifeline are inextricably tied to his covert machinations that secured Luna Nozawa's controversial release from prison, an act that fractured his already precarious relationship with Liam. This medical intervention is Bill's audacious bid for forgiveness, not just for Luna, but for the lifetime of paternal distance, manipulation, and disappointment that preceded it. He is attempting to purchase reconciliation, leveraging his vast resources to literally buy back Liam's life and, by extension, a chance to rebuild their fractured bond on the foundation of this ultimate sacrifice. Yet, the chilling reality remains that Liam's survival hinges entirely on the competence and intentions of a phantom, a doctor whose sudden appearance feels less like serendipity and more like the emergence of a predator drawn to the scent of Spencer wealth and vulnerability. Is this enigmatic figure a brilliant, renegade pioneer ostracized by conventional medicine, their genius buried under layers of necessary secrecy? Or are they a cold, calculating opportunist, viewing Liam's desperate situation and Bill's bottomless wallet as the perfect ingredients for a profitable, high-stakes experiment, regardless of the human cost? The procedure itself, inherently risky and defiantly experimental, exists in a terrifying gray zone. It might be a revolutionary breakthrough suppressed by bureaucracy, or it could be dangerous pseudoscience peddled to the desperately wealthy. The doctor's shadowed persona fuels these fears. Their lack of transparency isn't just professional discretion, it feels like a deliberate strategy, a shield guarding motives that could range from the nobly radical to the chillingly mercenary or even the outright malevolent. Grace's coerced involvement acts as a grim foreshadowing, suggesting the doctor operates within a web of control and intimidation, where ethics are negotiable and patience are assets. Bill's willingness to plunge Liam into this unknown, trusting a faceless entity with his son's very consciousness, underscores the terrifying absoluteness of Liam's predicament. This shadowy doctor, emerging from the void with their unproven, potentially dangerous protocol, represents not merely a chance, but seemingly the only chance, a final, desperate roll of the dice on a life hanging by the thinnest of threads. The mystery doctor is thus the pivot point upon which Liam's future balances, a figure of potential salvation wrapped in an enigma of profound danger, their impending arrival at the private clinic not just a medical handover, but the moment Liam Spencer steps irrevocably into the unknown, his second chance at life resting entirely in the hands of a stranger whose scalpel could carve healing or doom, whose true face remains the most critical and terrifying, unanswered question of his fragile existence. Steffi Forrester, painstakingly erected upon the scorched earth of their shared history with Liam Spencer, didn't so much crumble as shatter under the seismic force of his reappearance, his return, emerging not from the shadows of memory or the pages of a condolence card, but stepping audaciously back into the harsh sunlight of Los Angeles reality after being mourned, grieved, and ultimately laid to rest in the emotional cemeteries of their hearts, wasn't merely a surprise, it was a visceral detonation, a psychological ambush that ripped through the fragile peace they had clawed their way towards, leaving them gasping not just for air, but for comprehension, their carefully curated presence instantly obliterated by the ghost of a past they had, with monumental effort, tried to bury. For Hope, Liam's sudden materialization was a collision of irreconcilable truths, the man whose absence had carved a cavernous void within her, whose presumed watery demise had plunged her into a paralyzing abyss of grief from which she'd only recently begun to tentatively emerge, clinging to the unexpected, complex lifeline offered by Thomas Forrester, a relationship built on shifting sands of redemption, shared trauma, and a desperate need for stability, was now standing before her, flesh and blood, breathing, alive. The sheer impossibility of it short-circuited her senses. The relief, the dizzying, overwhelming joy that he was safe, warred violently with the horrifying realization that her profound mourning, her tear-soaked nights, her gradual, painful acceptance of a future permanently dimmed by his loss, had been predicated on a catastrophic lie. This revelation wasn't just news, it was an existential betrayal that instantly invalidated months of anguish and forced her to confront the terrifying instability of her current path, the tentative trust she'd placed in Thomas, the fragile family unit they were nurturing with Douglas, the hard-won sense of moving forward, all of it suddenly felt precarious, built on the quicksand of false premises. The ground hadn't just shifted beneath Hope's feet, it had opened into a chasm, swallowing the person she had become in Liam's absence and demanding she reconcile her past devotion with her present commitments, all while the ghost she wept for stood resurrected before her, a living, breathing accusation and an impossible temptation rolled into one devastating package, his very presence screaming the question she dared not voice. Had she moved on too soon, betrayed their love, or merely survived the hell he inadvertently plunged her into? Simultaneously, for Steffi, Liam's return struck with the brutal force of a physical blow, a grotesque disruption to the hard-earned sanctuary she had meticulously built with John Finnegan and their children. Her journey away from the toxic, addictive whirlwind of the Liam cycle had been arduous, marked by heartbreak, self-discovery, and the profound, grounding love Finn represented, a love that promised calm, unwavering support, and a future untethered from the exhausting drama Liam invariably brought. Seeing him walk through the door wasn't a joyful reunion, it was an invasion, a violation of her hard-won peace, a monstrous specter from a past she had definitively closed the door on. The shock was laced with a potent, righteous fury at the sheer audacity of his return after vanishing without a trace, forcing her and hope through unimaginable grief, fury at the timing, a cruel twist of fate threatening the domestic bliss she cherished with Finn and her children, fury, most deeply, at the unwelcome resurgence of chaotic energy he embodied, threatening to unravel the stability she fought so fiercely to protect. Yet, beneath the protective armor of anger, a treacherous undercurrent of profound, unsettling recognition stirred, a visceral, involuntary pull towards the man who had been such an intrinsic, albeit destructive, part of her life's tapestry, a reminder of passions both exhilarating and devastating. This wasn't just about an ex-husband reappearing, it was the terrifying prospect of history repeating itself, of being sucked back into the gravitational pull of a man whose presence had always meant emotional earthquakes, forcing her to confront whether the fortress she built with Finn could withstand the hurricane-force winds Liam inevitably brought, and whether the ghost of what they once shared still held any power to unsettle the profound love she now knew. The sheer physicality of their reactions became the silent symphony of the moment, hope likely frozen mid-motion, perhaps clutching a forgotten object like an anchor against the tidal wave of disbelief, her face cycling through the stages of grief in reverse, denial crashing into dawning horror, then surging into a dizzying, tearful euphoria before collapsing into paralyzing confusion, her eyes wide, unblinking, searching Liam's face for proof this wasn't a cruel mirage, her body trembling with the aftershocks of emotional whiplash. Steffi, conversely, might have recoiled instinctively, a physical manifestation of her desire to shield her new life, her posture rigid, eyes flashing with a storm of fury and defensive alarm, perhaps a hand unconsciously rising as if to ward off the encroaching chaos, her jaw clenched tight against the torrent of accusations and fears threatening to spill out, every line of her body screaming resistance against the intrusion.